This video was made possible by the EA Creator Network. And the footage captured here today was off a work-in-progress build and not the final release of the game. What's going on, everybody? My name is C4, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video, I'm going to drop all the tips and tricks that I have learned over 20 full seasons in Dynasty Mode in College Football 25 to dominate recruiting. Be it the transfer portal, be it landing 5-star recruits, finding the best 4-star recruits, finding the dev traits, getting the #1 overall recruiting class, be it at a prolific 5-star school, be it at a 3-star school that you're working your way up and you don't have nearly the same amount of resources. With the tips that I drop in today's video, you're going to be recruiting like a god in no time. First thing is first, if you want to dominate recruiting right at the very beginning of your dynasty, make sure you select the recruiting backstory. With that, you're going to get the recruiting skill tree as your opening tree, and this is just clearly by looking at it, it's broken down by position in the first tier, and it is going to give you buffs to each individual position. It's either going to make them take less time to fully scout. Recruiting actions are going to have bigger bumps up on their interest in your school. You're going to have more hours in tier 3. Like, I almost recommend every position, maybe not the specialist. At minimum, it's a grind. You got to work your way up to it by getting at least to skill 3 so you can have increased hours on these players. So instead of having a cap of 50 hours you could spend, getting 75 is going to be huge. And then eventually, once you have 2 top 5 recruiting classes and you spend 50 points in the top section, you'll be able to unlock the elite recruiter side, which, you know, it's one of those deals where by the time you've unlocked this, your points are going to be so scarce that you really need to make the decision, are these ones really that valuable? I think the argument can be made that the top tier of the recruiting tree, that is where the best value is for your points. I do kind of want to wrap up the coaching tree side of things of the recruiting process because it does go hand in hand, but it is getting a little more endgamey, and you're not going to be able to take advantage of these tips and tricks right away. But when you are working your way through your skill tree, obviously with a recruiting background, you're going to work your way there. And hopefully you can eventually, at minimum, get to tier 3 and get extra hours for all your players. I would suggest the next area you want to unlock is strategist. So to get strategist, you have to win 4 bowl games. So you're not hitting this until year 4 at minimum. You also have to spend 25 points in recruiter, which will be easy, but you have to spend 25 points in tactician as well. Tactician's not a bad skill tree. This is where you're going to get player attribute boost. You're going to get like short and medium throw accuracy boost for your quarterback, catching boost for your wide receiver and tight ends, coverage boost for your DBs, etc., etc. But essentially, you don't have to spend those points. Just get Tactician, which costs 10 to unlock it at base. Spend your 25 so that you can unlock Strategist, which is another area that is going to make recruiting easier for you. And there's no hidden secret to recruiting in College Football 25. It is hard. It is especially hard when you are a small school. So any advantage that you can get to make the recruiting process easier, that is the biggest tip and trick that is in the books. So as you can look here through Strategist, it is broken down by all these different positions, and you're going to get complimentary visit boosts. You're going to get visits overall, just making a bigger impact on your player. You get Last Dance, which is not really that important, but the biggest one is down at tier 4. Dev traits are king, in my opinion. Dev traits are more important. I would take a 3-star with an elite dev trait over a 5-star with a normal. Mind reader is incredibly important, and I don't think you'd have a bad time if you full in on all of these different positions, spending all your points and allocating them so that you could get tier 4 mind reader from quarterback all the way to your DBs. So the first stage of recruiting, I'm giving you a tip right now, is going to be incredibly frustrating if you don't toggle it off. And I'm going to show you a reason later on why you want to toggle it back on. And that is here in your base settings, and it is a team setting auto recruiting. So, I mean, if you wouldn't be watching this video if you don't care about recruiting, but if you don't care about recruiting, you can just turn it on auto. It does an all right job. You'll never get like a top 10 recruiting class, but it also won't sabotage you if you're a good school. I simmed it out. I think I was in like the 20s, which wasn't too bad, but initially, always turn this off, because if not, the CPU is going to mismanage your resources. So now it is time to set your initial target list. You have a max of 35, and really the word of the day for recruiting in College Football 25 is resource management. Your hours are king. Now, as the Florida Gators, I have a lot. This is year 11 of a dynasty that I've won a couple daddies. I've fully flushed out a recruiting tree or 2. So I have 1,100 points. If you are starting as like a 2-3-star school, you probably have a budget of like 200, 300, which makes it even more of a priority to value your resources when it comes to recruiting. And regardless of what I'm going to show you today is a little bit more on the high end, dealing with 4 and 5-star. The same thought process and what I'm about to break down applies regardless of the level of dynasty you're starting with. So we have our recommended board. This is Eddie. This is a gigantic big board of suggested names from the computer. It's good to follow for them, honestly, for the most part. It doesn't really lead you astray too bad. But you don't necessarily get everybody. You might be looking at this like, well, why? I want to try to get the #1 player in the nation. Well, to do that, tab off recommended, open it up to any state, and there you can take a look. And just for poops and giggles, the #1 player we are on is interesting. We got a couple of them here. We definitely, obviously, all want to be interested in all of these guys. And I will say, looking at someone like McCray, where we are 9th, or an athlete like Freeland, where we are 7th, you may think, I mean, hell, even Rasmussen at 4th. You may think that's a long shot, that why are we even going to bother trying to recruit these guys? We are that far out the path. There's other big schools. Now, McCray, as you can see right at the top of the webcam there, Georgia, more importantly, Kentucky, has a considerable lead. That is going to be tough. But when you look at Freeland, where we're 7th, look at the top team at TCU. He has Rice there as well. So honestly, we probably will... I'll keep McCray here just for an example to show how much ground can be gained as you sim from preseason, where we're at right now, to week 1. But Kentucky has a huge lead. I think someone like Freeland, where it's still a long shot at 7th, it is always worth looking at the influence that these current schools have ahead of you, and I think that is much easier of a gap to make up. But one thing you'll notice, and I cannot stress this enough, is that recruiting in college football 25 is a lot more difficult than what it was in NCAA football 14. Because in NCAA football 14, you would at least get the 40-yard dashes. You get the bench press. You get the squat. So at least you could kind of go in a direction of like, I know this guy's a big-time athlete. Well, in this game, you can find those things out, but you're going to have to scout them, and scouting a lot of players is going to consume your hour resource very quickly. So it is now time to kind of fill out our target list. We will probably getting pretty close to the max 35 out of 35 because we have 1,100 hours to spend. So we're going to be able to cast that super wide net to get this initial scouting and get our initial board with still the logic. Even if I get 35 targets, I still want to kind of shave that down, get some busts off the board, get some normal guys that just don't have really good attributes that I'm looking for. And I want to try to shave that list down to about 20, but it's very much the luxury because I have 1,100 hours. If you are a smaller school and you have 300 hours or 200 hours, I'd probably say you want to keep that number closer to 10 to 15 as you would oppose like what I'm going to try to do, which is 15 to 22, 23 in that range. But we'll look at the quarterbacks here, and I'm going to give you a little bit of John Madden analysis, but as you just, if you were taking the assumption, look, the top rated quarterback that's recommended, is this the game saying this guy's going to be a stud? Not really. A issue that I've seen, which I don't know if it correlates to real life or not, but there are so many players that get 4-star ratings. I don't know if that correlates to real life. I always just, maybe it is, but I always kind of just assume like if you are outside of like the top 200, 250 prospects, you're probably not pulling a 4-star rating. You're going to be a 3-star. So this guy is a 4-star and we are second interest, but he's also the 410th nationally ranked player. Whereas we have right below him, Gilreath is 142. And when the interest is still really in the same bubble. We have another couple guys, 400, 300. We have the Whittington, who's QB or player 107, and we are first ranked. As we go down here a little bit, we have Ty Long, the athlete, 41. Now we're 5th. 5th is not a gigantic gap to close, but I think it's important to at least remember that not all interest ratings are the exact same because, you know, a good example, I mean, we don't have a crazy... Oh, there we go. Here's a good example. We are 5th for Ty Long, which we can make that gap, right? Totally, for some 5ths, but not this one because, look, Clemson and Alabama already have a considerable lead. Like, those interest bars are already over the halfway point, which means, like, you could have a shot. Like, if we scout him and he looks immaculate, like 97 throw power, 95 speed, you want to get him. Absolutely, by all means, I think you can make a legitimate run. But that 5th is rough. This one down here where we're 4th, look at the bars. The interest is so low that the gap in ground that you can gain if you show a lot of interest in this player, you can compensate for that. And probably by the time you go from preseason and we sim to week 1 of the regular season, you'll probably be his first rated player. Whereas someone like this, where you're 5th, it'd be a little bit tougher. So we're going to avoid players like that right now. We're going to try to keep our ranks within the top 150-ish players that are in their top 3. Another good example, because we got 3 4-star recruits all super interested in joining the program. Now, I don't want to completely dismiss the fact that a 4-star that's, in the high 200s, low 300s, they still could roll a gem. So we will actually right now kind of show how I would resource manage these 3 players that have us as their first interest. Obviously, Kaiser the athlete is 33rd. Expectations are he's going to be the best of the bunch. But the reality is, in the business of resource management, you probably don't want to, have 3 running backs that you are constantly spending resources on for scouting. So I would say in this exact instance, and it could be the exact same for every position, you will have situations where you have 3 or 4 guys that look real good, regardless of what your school rating. They could be a 3-star, they could be a 2-star, you have them scout, they all look good. 3 or 4 of those guys, really, unless your roster is going to be bared at that spot and you get your team needs here. And you don't always have to follow your team needs. Sometimes I actually feel like it's a little inaccurate, but we don't need 3 running backs. So I want to try to just get this down to 1 or 2. Apple is not a gem or anything like that, but he has 3 abilities. We have Allen, who we're first. He is perfectly fine as a power back. And then we got Kaiser, the 33rd ranked player. He's pretty good as well. All these guys are pretty good. Ideally, in a perfect world, one of these guys would be a bust. You'd get a little red crack that says he's not good. And that's an easy way to kind of thin your list a little bit. But in this instance, we got power backs. So I think, honestly, the safest bet is speed. Cole Allen has the least speed, so that's going to kind of be the tiebreaker. But you got to be ruthless when setting your board. We have 3 players that are first interest with our team. They're all 4-stars. They all have decent attributes. They all got good abilities. You can't keep everyone. So you got to find little things that you're looking for in your players, which, casually for a running back, I want the faster guy as kind of the tiebreaker. And always, I guess, technically, if you are chasing like a number 1 recruiting class, you could always kind of value the star rating and what that's going to go for the official grading, the points that get scored. I kind of went through and I got the top targets. Some of them are 4-stars that I just want to kind of take a swing at. Others are players that are between 4 and 5s that have us in their top 3 schools. The next process is now spending your hours scouting all these players. And as you improve your skill tree, it's going to cost less to fully scout these players. Whereas I think if you have 0, it takes 50 points to fully scout a player. Whereas once you prioritize the recruiting in your skill trees, you can get players fully scouted for 20 points. So what I'm going to do is, obviously we've lucked out here a little bit in having a lot of 5-stars that we have first interest in, but 27 is too many. So we can't keep everyone. So from this initial scout, there we go. We got a nice gem there. Gems usually do make the final cut, but in this situation, especially 4-stars, maybe it's just the idea that 4-star seems really, really good. But if you get a 4-star, that is a bust. There we go. Ben Tandy. 27's too many targets. So it's an easy, thin the herd, get rid of all the red guys. Ooh, here we go. This is a tough one. We got Nick Avila, 5-star. First interest in our school, bust. I'd say if you're thin on your budget, you'd probably make the cut. But we're also going to try and see if we can get the number 1 recruiting class in this little example mock season. So we'll keep them on just for the prospects points. There's another example. We have 2 4-star quarterbacks, Gilreath and Whittington, but they're both end up being gems. So the tiebreaker, again, at 26 total targets. We want to get that down to close to 20 as we can. Fortunately, we're going to have to send this gem back into the water. Catch and release. So we got a list down now to 21. And the second stage is you want to offer all these recruits now, spending 5 hours to get them onto scholarships. Sometimes you'll be lucky enough that you get the automatic verbal commit when you offer a scholarship. We got Corey Kaiser, the running back, 33rd in the nation to sign on the dotted line. I might get about 1 a year, but there is an ability in your CEO skill tree that you can unlock that improves the chances. It just doesn't give us a percentage of what it does, and it's super expensive. But there is ways to buff this initial commit, which obviously is gigantic because it's just more resources that can go towards the other players once we get into the regular season. But before we go, I want to take note on some of these long shots. Rasmussen, the big 5-star, 98 speed. We are 4th in his rating. I want to see where we go. We also have down here McFadden. We are 7th. Gammon, we are 4th. Kroom, we are 8th. Let's see how much ground we can make up. We now simmed to week 0. We're Rasmussen. We went from 4th to 1st. We got McFadden. We're 1st. Gammon, we're 1st. Kroom, we're 1st. So there is obviously, perspective. I am a very good program right now, and if you are doing this as UMass, you're not going to have the same type of luck. But rule of thumb is when you feel good about your recruiting, never be too afraid because of your ranking with a player. Sometimes it's worth to look at, the progress of other schools, and sometimes there's just unrealistically no chance. But a lot of times, especially when you put the work in, the legwork in growing your recruiting trees and getting your influence up, you can gain a lot of ground. But this is another thing. This board looks outstanding, right? You're looking at this right now. Holy C4, the amount of 4 and 5 stars that you have first. Recruiting in college football 25. I feel like I'm repeating myself just a little bit. It is incredibly unforgiving. This board looks like I'm going to have the greatest class of all time. I'm going to walk, eyes closed, to the #1 recruiting class. I guarantee when we sim here to probably about week 5, week 6, half of these guys are going to commit to other schools because you just don't have enough resources to get this much top talent, to give them the amount of time that they need to come to your program at the same time. So how do I like to divvy up my resources? My rule of thumb is that if you are a 5-star, I'm going to hit you with send the house. I'm going to for sure lock in. I'm committing 50 points. Again, to be able to do how I'm about to spend, you can't have a huge 35 target board. If as long as it's closer to 20, you're going to be able to kind of follow this approach, which has given me a lot of top 5 and a couple #1 overall recruiting classes. So if you are a base 5-star, I'm hitting you with the send the house. So all of our true 5s have now 50 points allocated to them. Everybody else, I'm going to try and start with the contact friends and family 25 hours. So we got our 50s, the send the house. And what these are going to give us are 5, 6 points of influence gain depending on where your upgrades are at, which is always huge in maintaining that first place position. 25 friends and family, those are 4-point influences. And what they really do help establish, as you can see right behind the webcam there, is the motivations. And you get the red X's. Those are things that are not important to players. As you go through the weeks, you're going to get green check marks. You're going to find out what is important to these players, which is going to be very important when you want to hard sell or soft sell them on your pitch. And when you bring them into your visit, you know which area you want to focus on to try to get them to get the most influence to commit to your school. So after bumping up all of our top targets to 75, we have 0 hours remaining, which is good in a way. It's good to have that early on. But eventually, these players are going to want to come for visits, and that is incredibly important. It almost feels like, regardless of the fact that I am their first interest, if they go on a visit before they come to my school, 50-50, they're going to commit to the other team. Like, as a Florida Gator rebuild, the amount of times that I was pretty good, pretty decent lead first with the Hurricanes at #2, but they went on a visit to the Miami Hurricanes before they came to our school, and I lost them to the Hurricanes. Honestly, maybe even more than 50%. So it is very important, especially your top tier targets. As soon as you could schedule a visit, you have to do that. So here is now going into week 1, and everyone except one guy has us as our fourth school. And I'm going to take that as a sign of disrespect, and I'm getting this guy off my board. We have our first player, Tyler Isaac, the #3 player in the nation. 5-star is ready for a visit. So what we are going to do, we only have 25, so that means we need to find a way to get 15 points so we can schedule his visit ASAP. So when it comes time that you got to kind of manage your hours, I always go by position. Clearly, we have a 5-star pass rusher that we want to try to get in for a visit, so we're going to go to a 4-star pass rusher as the player that's going to have to give up a little bit. Still got 50 points, so we can DM him, so we can get more information on his motivations. But now that gives us the 40 points that we need to have Mr. Isaac come in for a visit. Now, you can decide which week you want him to visit. I will stress, you may look at this and say, wow, we wait till week 11. Look at the influence gained. If we can beat Auburn, we get 3 versus week 3 against FCS school where we get none. However, very, very, very unlikely he's going to be uncommitted come week 11. He's already going to be signed up for another team. So I almost throw that out the window as soon as you can get them in for a visit. As long as, I'm going to get the webcam out of the way here, you have at least 1 green. Find out 1 motivation that he wants to see. And he cares about his pro potential. Look, we get 3 influence points off that anyways. So I always will say prioritize getting them in early versus waiting for the best possible week. Now as you sim, other players are going to get kind of sick and tired of your school and the fact that you have such a big board, and they're going to go other way. So honestly, from 2021, if you can now, as you go through the weeks, get that list down to 15, like the guys that, kind of bump your school out of the way, it's almost about collecting hours now at this point. Now, let the nature run its course. Some guys are going to stick with you. Look, I haven't done any other influence on anyone, and they're still at first, but there will every now and again be like 1 or 2, 3 guys through the first 3 weeks of the season that just inevitably, maybe they already had a visit with Miami or whatever. It's not the end of the world, especially for our class here. We have like 3 wide receivers we're kind of targeting. So those 25 points are more valuable than trying to stick in there and compete with Miami for these 2 wide receivers. We still have enough to bring in 1 more player, but because, for an example, we have Isaac already coming against FCS team, we have Gammon, another 5-star. He wants to come in. You got to balance your visits a little bit. Because we already have a DN visiting, you can't kind of double up on the same week. But because I really want to go all in on that week 3, we have Pujols, the 5-star safety. He can come in on that week. Don't got to worry about it. And we're going to sell him on, let's see if we can get him on proximity to home. We got Tyler Isaac. We're going to focus on him because he's the first player that we have coming in for a visit. He has bumped us down to his 2nd school. Miami's putting in work, but he is coming for his visit this week. So I think that's going to be a great push for us to try to get him to sign. Another element of this recruiting is the sell pitch, the pitch jobs. You can hard sell and soft sell a player. What we are going to do is we'll just soft sell for the time being. So we're going to take away and remove the 25 hours for friends and family, and that's going to open things up for the soft sell, which gives us a 4-star bump. I'll get the webcam out of the way. We know what he wants to look for because we went all in with the 75 hours. We have everything. So he wants championship contender, pro potential, and program condition. So if you go through all these, eventually you will find the one that will give you all 3 things that he wants to hear. So we're hitting him with a visit this week and the football influencer. I'll be shocked if we are not his #1 team next week. And on the inverse of having 2 players come in on the same week, that's a negative. You can get positives. As you can see with CJ Ritzman, our middle linebacker, he will get a bump coming on our bye week because we have a defensive end also visiting. So we're going to sell him on the pro potential on if he comes to Florida. All right, big roll here. We're simming past the FCS game. We have our first players coming in for a visit, and we get Ben Pujols, the 5-star safety, signed on. Oh, those goddamn Hurricanes. Happens, man. I told you. Come mid-season, even the guys we feel good about, 1st, 2nd place, the board is absolutely ruthless. How bad? On our bye week, Ritzman, who was in for the visit, lands him the 5-star. And our board, we still are maintaining pretty well on some of the other top guys as the #1 team. Got Rasmussen. Didn't even have to bring him in on a visit. And we get the 5-star wide receiver to commit. We get the 5-star pass rusher, Mitch McFadden, to commit. The 5-star pass rusher, Alan Gammon, to commit. The 4-star offensive lineman, DeMarco Hood. Oh my God, the center, we're getting this, crushed it. But we felt good about everyone else. And it's just, your board will cannibalize itself a little bit. All right, we're going to take this as our last kind of window here. We get the 5-star D tackle, the 4-star D tackle. Our board is looking pretty good. We got 1 target left. Now, looking pretty good, right? Recruiting, we're feeling like we're in a great spot. We got a bunch of 5s, a bunch of 4s. But as we can see right now, we have the #3 class in the nation. We're trailing Oregon. We're trailing those goddamn Hurricanes. But as you can see, and this is just if you're not only this is just to explain if you're chasing that because you want the #1 recruiting class, but you also have in your skill tree, you need to have 2 top 5 recruiting classes to unlock the 2nd tier of recruiting upgrades. So if you are chasing a top 5 recruiting class, how you get there, for the most part, is by quantity, not necessarily quality. We got 6 5s. That's probably going to be the most in the entire class. It's still not going to be good enough because Miami already has twice the amount of recruits. So that means you got to kind of go in the weeds a little bit, get some of the lower 4 stars, get a lot of 3 stars. And I have found for time consumption and generally less managing, which it gets tedious, especially when you're kind of digging through the weeds at the bottom of the recruiting pile. In my league settings, once my initial board, which we're at right now, minus 2 players that are still undecided, that are leaning towards us. But once you kind of get your big dogs, if you are chasing a top recruiting class, I just recommend turn on auto recruiting because this will be able to get a bunch of 4s, a lot of 3s, just to make up the numbers to get you the points in those overall recruiting, which you'll see in just 1 second. This is my first week simming with the auto recruiting on, and look at the board. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 4 stars, couple 3 stars mixed in that are interested in our school. But this is the legwork that, I mean, you don't really want to be working. Like a lot of these guys are in, look at that, look at the national rankings, 400s, 300s, 500s, 1800 for this linebacker. But these are just essentially going to help you make up the numbers. You already got your fun players. You already got your top priorities. Now, hey, If you want to just fully immerse yourself in the recruiting process, keep it off and go find your studs. Go find your gems. So you now have a lot of points to work with because your hours that you were previously allocating to the big dogs, they're already locked in. So you can go through another complete recruiting cycle. So now we've got to the end of the season, and it is now time to dump into the transfer portal. If you're following the same method that I have done, however, one thing you need to do right away is go back on and turn off the auto recruiting because you don't want the CPU messing with your portal recruits. I'm going to turn this sucker off. So our first look at the transfer portal. I would say it was not what I expected after reading like the Dynasty deep dive blogs and stuff like that. I did a 10-year rebuild with the Florida Gators. One of my goals was to land the #1 player in the transfer portal. Not once over 10 seasons was the #1 player even open to wanting to join my team. Now, there are upgrades that you can get in your coach tree, which helps position-specific interests as far as the transfer portal is concerned. So as you can see, the #1 transfer portal player, Quan Barnes, the running back from NC State, doesn't have any interest. So there's a chance that if you upgraded the running back transfer portal persuasion ability, he would be unlocked for us to go get him, which could be the case. But generally speaking, a lot of the transfer portal interests are not in your control. However, you could still absolutely get some dogs through the portal. And well, it's because they're already older players, but I found I got my best players in the portal versus my incoming class of freshmen, which kind of makes sense in a way. But again, the portal is like anything else. I got all the 4 stars that have us within their top 5, but the fact of the matter is you still want to be first to get them in on their visits, because if you, as you can see, we have Reinhardt here. Don't really need to worry about scouting too much. You can still fully scout these players. I don't think I've ever found a guy that's a bust or a gem. You just get to unveil their stats. And this is a damn good player. It's good to see what their abilities are at. But for the most part, it's still the same kind of process. You want to hit them as much as you can. Send the farm. You have so many hours. You're going to have all your hours. Definitely delve all of them into the portal and what players want to jump to your portal versus some of like the straggler 3 stars as far as some of the high school recruiting. I would absolutely, at this point, divvy my points and focus 100% on the transfer portal. I would say if you had to make cuts to the portal where we just have a bunch of 4 stars, say there's no immediate positional need, I would almost just go off class. Like a sophomore is going to offer a little bit more value to your team than a junior because you potentially have 1 extra year of them on your roster. We have max spent 75 on all of our targets here in the transfer portal. And whatever your number is, be it 50 or 75, try and spend all of it on these guys the first wave. Because what you want to do is by spending the max, for our example, 75, so I just get the webcam out of the way, you're going to get their interest for the second wave. And as soon as you can even just get one thing that they are interested in for their motivations, then you schedule a visit. You try to get these guys on the 2nd and 3rd week of the portal for their visits. Because if not, you snooze, you lose. There's going to be no one left come the 4th week. After going all in, 75s on all of our top targets, we are now first place for all of these players. And as we look in their recruiting, we got green, green. As soon as you see a green check mark, that is when you 100% start scheduling them for visits. And then you got to prioritize because you're not going to be able to schedule all these guys on day 1. There's a max to how many players you can have visit. So make sure the S tier guys, you prioritize who's the most needy to come on the earliest day possible. So we're going to take a look at Colin Reinhardt here to make sure we get him in on the first visit because Virginia Tech is right on our tail for the recruiting process. So we're going to schedule our visit. I think we have too many guys to get them all on week 2. But preferably you get them on week 2. And he likes brand exposure. So as long as you get at least one of their motivations, feel free to send them on their visit with whatever you got the green check mark for. You should have good results. I have. So we have everyone coming on their visit. They all got check marks. I expect we'll get all of, if not 95% of these guys to land. And they're all 4 stars, which is going to all stack up for our overall recruiting class, which is huge. And look at that, 4 stars, 4 stars, 4 stars, 4 stars. Welcome to the squad, fellas. And then another tip is because you're just back in the weeds. The first wave of the transfer portal is over. Again, if you're trying to chase that #1 class, at this point, you still have 2 weeks of sim left. Go back, turn on the auto recruiting, and let them fill out your class just to try to pad your numbers a little bit. So by turning back on auto recruiting, it got us 5 more 3 stars, which just go towards trying to help us achieve #1 recruiting class in the nation. I think we're going to be pretty close this year. Let's check it out. National Signing Day. Did we get, in my example, the number one? I mean, our class was sensational. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 5-star recruits. We got our 3 stars, which kind of make up the numbers a little bit, but then we went into the transfer portal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 4 stars through the transfer portal, and we end up, oh, so close. The number 2 recruiting class. But if you follow this method, you will get the number 1. I think it's the perfect balance of user scouting, get your big dogs, get your 5 stars, get your gems, but then there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done to get the numbers, and it's just, that is insane to get 26 4 stars. They also had 6 5s, so full kudos to Oregon. That is an all-time. 256 might be the highest points I've had and not got a number 1 recruiting class. Miami was right there as well, but I think that fine balance, again, between you scouting and then you flick on the auto scouting, just kind of in the dog days of the season where you want to more focus on the on-field product. I think it's a great balance. It's a great complementary option, and it's not garbage. It's not like you turn that on and you only get 3 stars. They got us a bunch of different 4-star players as well, so it's a good balance. Now this is the point where you can go look and see if you rolled any elite dev trades. Let's see, come on. Usually I can get 2 or 3. There we go. We got 1 in Kroom, the number 12 player, the 5-star D-tackle. Elite dev traits are what you want to chase. Look at that Rice, the 5-star safety with an elite dev trait. It's not always 5-star. Callum Graves, the 4-star. Look at the ranking, 243 in the nation. He popped with an elite dev trait, which is huge. I will say, have not seen any elite dev traits come via the transfer portal. We get Devontae Wyatt, and that is a lie because we get one right there. That might be the first 4-star, 21st in the nation in the transfer portal. The sophomore elite dev trait. Wow. What a steal from the Georgia Bulldogs. Suck it. But there you go, fellas. That is everything I can share about tips and tricks regarding recruiting and the transfer portal. I think there's not a whole lot of tells yet. I mean, maybe other people have different tips and you can pick up things and take all the information together and absolutely dominate your dynasty. But I think the big picture for recruiting in College Football 25 is, 1, it's a lot more difficult and challenging. You have a lot less information than what you got in NCAA Football 14. 2, it's more about resource management than it is like diving through the prospects and fully scouting every single player. You gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them on these players. You gotta know when guys just aren't worth it. They aren't worth the resource. And you always should prioritize earlier on quality over quantity. And then when it comes time that your quality's all gone, you turn on the auto scout and you let them get your quantity to help your class. Or if you're not chasing that class and you want to go find manually, start scouting some guys, try to find some gems, totally can do that as well. But if you want to min-max, I think I showed you today the best way to min-max to get the highest recruiting class possible. And I hope you guys learned something. And if you did learn something, I would very much appreciate hitting that old subscribe button. It's year 10 for old C4 here on YouTube's as a football video game content creator. I'm so happy that college football is back. But hey, wouldn't this be a cool year to finally have the channel pop off? So if you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button. For the YouTube robots, hit that like button. Let me know in the comment section below if there's any other questions you may not have had answered here for recruiting. Or if there's any other tips and tricks that you want to know about Dynasty Mode, let me know and I will try my best to answer them and or make a video on it. But that will do for me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, it's your boy C4 saying peace out. Love ya. Have a good one.